Graduate School, The Final Frontier. That's what we're going with for a topic. Where our guest today is, for the second time, live in studio. Okay, taped in studio, but he's in studio. Dr. Jorge Cham, and we normally don't use the term doctor. We're a doctor-free zone in the show, but I got to remind people, he's not just a cartoonist. He lived the PhD graduate student experience, right? And you actually got your bachelor's degree from Georgia Tech in mechanical engineering, right?
Yes.
And then a PhD in mechanical engineering from Stanford. And then went...
I am thus overeducated, yes.
Right. Well, then went to the seventh layer of hell at Caltech, right, from which very few people actually escape, as a full-time instructor, researcher. So basically, you were living the Big Bang Theory. Is that a correct statement?
No.
Okay.
I would not say I was living the Big Bang Theory. No, yeah, I was an instructor. I like to tell people that my ID card said faculty, but my paycheck said postdoc.
Okay.
By the numbers.
And I hate to break it to you, nowadays, faculty, postdoc, not a big difference.
Not
actually.
a big difference.
I mean, we haven't a raise here in several years, and we've had furlough days and things like that.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
really?
so
that's why you turned to radio.
That's why, radio. It's a very lucrative sideline.
Yeah. I'm sure every listener out there had to put some coins into some machine just to listen to this.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
And sitting in is our chief engineer, Charlie Bennett, warrior king of the library, and faculty staff advisor to WRIK, because we don't know where Trent Altman is, but hopefully he'll be here for the live broadcast of this on Wednesday. And just a reminder to our listeners, back on November 19th of 2009, Grad School, Funnier Than You Think, was when we first interviewed Jorge Cham. But he's back here to give us a brief lecture, and then we'll see a screening of, what's it called, PhD the movie.
It's officially called Piled Higher and Deeper.
Okay, and that's the official name of the comic strip that you write.
Yes,
right.
Yes, that is the name of the comic.
And before we get into the movie, for the benefit of our listeners who did not listen to that November 19th show, which is online at insidetheblackbox.org, if you want to listen to it. And for those not familiar with Piled Higher and Deeper or PhD Comics, can you give us a brief history of how this started when you were a graduate student at Stanford?
Sure. So it's a comic strip that mainly appears at phdcomics.com and in student newspapers. And it's a comic I started while I was in grad school. So I always doodled as a kid, growing up in Panama, and then here at Georgia Tech, I did a little bit. I did like a T-shirt for my dorm, Glenn dorm.
Oh, yes, Glenn. I know Glenn.
Which I hear now doesn't have, open showers, but they put curtains now between.
Oh, okay. But it's still where freshmen, one freshman per floor ends up playing Halo Reach for the entire semester, locked in their dorm room and never leaves.
Is that the reputation?
Yeah.
Wow. Back then, I think it was Doom.
Okay, right. It's just the video game changes. That's it.
Yeah. So. Or Wolfenstein. What's the...
All right, now you're dating yourself.
Yeah, I know. So then I went off to grad school, and in my first term there, I saw this ad in the student newspaper calling for comics from students. And, we was just talking to some friends, and we thought, hey, they're always about undergrads, these comic strips. There should be one about grad school, because, that's when the real pain begins. And, and so I was just kind of inspired. I just read a book about Doonesbury and its kind of significance in the 80s. And so I just started doing it for fun and to kind of procrastinate from my duties as a TA and taking classes and working in a lab. And so, I just did it for the newspaper there. And then a few months later, I put it up on a free web server on campus. And then it just kind of has been growing ever since.
And based on our interview when you were here last time, you did this with only one class as a kid, no formal art training. I believe you said you took one art class when you were a young kid.
I took one art class, yeah. But okay. I read a bunch of comics and comic books all through my youth and adulthood and now. And so, I always just doodled for myself as a kid. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when you were with us
Thanks for calling
time,
it art, by the way.
No, absolutely. And Steve Harvey, our guest co-host, did certainly call it art. It is art, right? And it does appear in the Technique here on the campus of Georgia Tech.
Cool.
And you do give it to college newspapers for free.
I do, yes.
Which is a wonderful thing. So, but he seems well dressed. I mean, do you make money just by selling the books or licensing it occasionally to?
I make money selling drugs, but
okay.
the comics. No, I'm just
there
kidding.
It is,
I'm totally just kidding. You guys have me saying crazy things here, but
I'm not going to cut that out.
Right, we won't.
Okay.
That's okay, because we know you're just joking.
No, I am just joking. The website supports itself through, merchandise and books and speaking engagements, and now the movie, which is doing pretty well.
Right. So let's talk about the movie, because we're here. In fact, shortly after this interview, we're going to go over. We're going to listen to you talk about this, and then we're going to screen the movie. And not only are the graduate students excited, but my faculty colleagues who did go to graduate school at Caltech are very excited about seeing this film. So when you were here last time, you mentioned that this is a story that's not often told, and when it's told, it's not told well. Is PhD the movie, or is it Piled Higher and Deeper the movie? What's the formal title?
There's an ambiguity there.
Okay.
No, officially in the movie it's called Piled Higher and Deeper, but we just call it the PhD movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this an attempt to tell the story of the toiling, underappreciated, underpaid graduate student better?
I think that was I think the main motivation for me to start the comics, which was to really kind of tell these stories that I was witnessing, that I was going through, that I was seeing all of my friends go through, to just kind of talk about them and tell them and make light of them, because as you're saying, I feel like it's really not something that you see very much in popular culture. It's always about the cops and the lawyers. I'm sure I told this joke already in this program, but it's always about the cops and the lawyers and the doctors and the the real doctors, not the PhD.
Yes,
kind.
exactly. The ones with the low salaries and the poor golf handicaps.
Yes, the poor golf. And so I always felt like it was a story that wasn't being told, or when it was told, they always, I feel, resort to these stereotypes of nerds and ultra awkward, one-dimensional kind of caricatures of people. In a way, you don't really see them as people; they're just kind of cartoons of people.
Right.
I always felt like we're real people, first of all, and we have many different talents and passions, and not one dimension. And so I think the movie was just kind of one more step into kind of getting that story captured and told and spread.
So when normal people watch this film, and I'm not including anyone in this room, will they see that nerds, that graduate students in science and engineering and technical fields are, more multidimensional, more interesting, more funny than most people think?
I hope so. I think I went through this whole process when we decided to make a movie, and I was writing it, and how should I write this movie? Should I try to write it for a broader audience, or should I just make it serious, make it kind of a screwball comedy, or make it an action thriller with guns and
Right, I want a lot of explosions, a lot of car chases.
That seems to work for Jerry Bruckheimer. So I thought.
There.
I sort of went through this whole process, and I think what I just decided at the end was just to make it as true to the comics as possible.
Oh, okay.
And then, but obviously, when you write a movie, it has to have sort of these characters and these character developments and things that happen to them, and so my big hope was that people may not necessarily get 100% of the sort of inside jokes or completely understand the situation, but they can sort of relate at least to the characters and to the general story arc of people who are young people who are not quite sure what they want to do with their lives, but at the same time feel like they have to prove themselves and do something. Yeah.
And will one of your major and favorite themes in PhD comics, desperation and procrastination, will that be featured heavily in this thing?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, the whole movie's about procrastination.
Okay, that's good. And
the whole movie was made by procrastination.
Oh, okay. So it's like I tell my students, your grandmother always says anything worth doing is worth doing well. Not always. Anything worth doing is sometimes worth doing before the deadline, before the due date, before NSF closes the funding cycle, that sort of thing, because you don't always have time to do those sorts of things. So what was your involvement in the film? So the film was written by you?
Yeah, I wrote the movie, and it was, I guess the easiest way to kind of capture it is I sort of executive produced the movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means big budget? Big craft services table for the actors?
Oh yeah, totally. Pizza and ramen noodles.
Okay, they should be used to that. Yeah. So you produced it. Who filmed it?
So what I did was last year I felt several things. I felt like the internet was moving a lot towards video now more than just comics, and I felt like the possibility of making your own movie was becoming more real as digital becomes easier and all of that. And so I just decided to and I also saw these videos that grad students were posting all over the world. I don't know if you've seen the Lady Gaga parody.
Oh yeah, it's
totally.
What was the name of it again?
Bad Romance, Bad Project it was called.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, hilarious stuff. And so I thought, wow, people are doing this. We should do something with PhD and some kind of film project. Yeah. And I had the idea to approach Caltech to do it because I worked there for a few years, and I knew they had a sort of a theater group there of grad students and scientists who'd like to do theater. So I approached them and about this idea of maybe making a few 5-minute videos or something, and then they got interested, and then the dean got interested, and then it sort of grew, and the more people we found really great people. So the one rule we had was that everyone involved had to somehow be tied to Caltech.
Okay.
So one of my big ideas for this was that the movie the purpose of the movie would be to kind of show, in the storyline of it, would be to convey this idea that grad students and scientists are real people. They have multiple times and dimensions, and so I wanted the making of it to also reflect that. And so all the actors are real graduate students. A lot of the faculty in the movie are real faculty.
But you picked the same faculty or the real faculty? I mean, I've given talks out of Caltech. I've met I know some of the faculty at Caltech. Some of them, they're way...
well, of course, I'm not going to comment on that. But
whereas I'll freely do it, right? And my friends at Caltech will call me right after this show. What's wrong with you, man?
No, but even so we found a grad student who liked to direct movies, Vahe Gabuchin. He's really good. And so he directed the movie. It was produced by a graduate student, also Meg Rosenberg. And some of the professional jobs, like the cinematography, was done by the spouse of a physics postdoc who was trained in cinematography. Wow. Yeah, so as we found more people who had these experience, we found a music director, we found a composer who worked as a lab manager on campus. It just kept elevating the project until it became more of a movie. Yeah.
So it truly is an organic project if you think about it. It's sort of graduate school comedy by graduates, for graduates, and about graduate students.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting melding of reality
and of course, I'm assuming you chose Caltech because you spent time at Caltech. You have contacts at Caltech. But Caltech, is it safe to say, is the nexus of the nerd world? Right? I mean, I did my PhD at MIT, and but at least we're not Caltech. That's basically what we say. I mean,
that's what Caltech says about MIT. No?
Oh, okay. But I mean, they're kind of out there. I mean, if you think about it, the entire CBS series, Big Bang Theory. It's generic. It's in Southern California. They don't mention Pasadena or anything like that. But anyone that works in science or engineering thinks of it as Caltech. We actually interviewed the UCLA physicist who does the little boards, right? And he helps them with their technical experiments. And he basically says, "Yeah, who are we kidding? It's Caltech."
I think I would take issue with that, and I would say that Caltech is much more than that, just like MIT and Georgia Tech.
But I mean it as a compliment, actually.
Really?
That's the scary part.
As a nexus. Actually, Caltech was just named the #1 university in the world. I don't know, did you guys catch that by the Times Higher Education?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was pretty interesting. I like to think that they judged that after I became involved with them.
Or because of your involvement.
Yes, I don't know, because. There's a correlation, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
What was I saying? No, is it I think one of the things I wanted to show was that, even a place like Caltech is not full of these stereotypes that you see in shows like The Big Bang Theory.
Absolutely.
If you see the movie and you watch the movie, the actors are all really fantastic and great, and everything there. The movie was made entirely by people at Caltech. So I think, I would say that a show like The Big Bang Theory, it's funny, it's well written, well produced, but I think it does tend to focus on these stereotypes that you see of how people think of academics and scientists. And
Right.
I think I take a bit of a pause for that because I always think about what the impact of these stereotypes have, what impact these things have on the culture, on young kids today who are if you're a little girl in some poor neighborhood or something, how will you see yourself as a scientist one day?
Yeah.
You watch the show that's maybe not would necessarily inspire you.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
And of course, we laugh at it because we know it's not really true.
Right.
They take the worst stereotypes and exaggerate them ad nauseum to generate comedy. But the one thing I found, and we may have talked about this last time you were on the program, is in doing 8 years of stand-up comedy, I realized that academics are much funnier and much more creative than most people think. And likewise, comedians are much smarter than most people think. Right? Because to be creative, to be funny, what you do with a cartoon, what I try to do with stand-up comedy, you have to be intelligent. And believe it or not, we actually have 3 or 4 faculty that do stand-up comedy. I work with them all the time.
No kidding.
So Lou Lefton, for example, who occasionally sits in as a guest host, my regular guest host, Bill Hunt, does stand-up comedy. Lou Lefton does stand-up comedy.
Wow.
Tomorrow night we're doing a show at one of the dorms.
Are you sure they don't just call it class? They don't?
Well, and that's the thing. So you can do it in class as well, right? And most students like that. Some administrators still frown upon that sort of thing.
No, when I started teaching at Stanford as a grad student, the guy that I was co-teaching with, his biggest advice for me was, he's like, just when you're teaching, you're in class. The biggest example you can follow are stand-up comedians.
Oh, okay.
Like,
good.
Go rent, and so I went out and I rented all these DVDs of stand-up comics
Cool.
and. Just look at the way they present themselves. They engage the audience, their posture, their gestures, the way they structure their bits, and how they tell a story, and all that. That's I think anyone who teaches should kind of pay attention to that too.
All right, so I'm going to take that to heart.
Yeah.
So the question is that what we need to do? Sort of take the humor that's in your comic strip, the humor that's in this movie, and use that to leverage our ability to communicate technical issues, science and technology, right? Because when you were in the program last time, you said you learned something about what makes engaging media, specifically engaging television, when you had pitched a show to, what was it, Discovery Channel?
We pitched it to the Science Channel and National Geographic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Was it about graduate students? Was it about science in general? Was it?
It was about graduate students. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
I wanted to really bring to light a lot of these stories of the things that grad students have to do to get their degrees.
Right. And so what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I learned that cable television is geared towards a very specific audience. So
and it's not PhD graduate students.
Well, it was literally described to me as Joe Sixpack. So or
right.
Joe construction worker, and so they have this very specific idea of what science should be, and very specific things that kind of motivate them to keep watching something like that.
Right.
So I think so that's cable, and that's fair enough, and that's great because at least. Although I did a comic recently where I kind of surveyed all the shows that these channels are outputting, and if you look at, for example, I'm not going to harp just on the Science Channel. So, for example, like National Geographic Channel, only about one show is about geography,
right?
And the rest are, usually about guns or state troopers.
Well, so was that a recent comic strip that you did?
Yeah.
Okay, so you are absolutely correct. What opened my eyes was. I had done some work with, the Discovery Channel a few years ago when they started their program, what was it called, Smash Lab. And a lot of people don't know this, but Smash Lab was their attempt to do Mythbusters with real engineers. So they gathered a dozen real engineers, and I was involved in this process to sort of pick the hosts. And they eventually did 4 hosts, and they wanted to do Mythbusters, but with real engineers. And here's what I learned. It died after 2 seasons.
Oh, no.
And what I learned was it's easy to take wacky special effects guys and teach them how to do a decent control experiment, which actually they do on Mythbusters. They do a pretty pretty good control experiment.
Do they? I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. And at first I was like, what are they doing? And I'm sure they have consultants that help them with that sort of thing. I think they do a good job, but it's easier to teach them to do a control experiment than it is to teach engineers to be funny, engaging, because they weren't on that show. And my latest, and that was a few years ago, but now my latest interaction is with the History Channel, and we're working with a studio trying to work a show to illustrate the engineering failures behind big natural and man-made disasters. So to go in there with virtual green screen and things like that. And they actually called up Georgia Tech because they wanted somebody from the South, because their hottest show is this Only in America, Larry the Cable Guy Presents.
Oh,
and when I heard that, it's all over. And everyone's sort of following that, right?
Oh, yeah, I think one of the biggest shows in the National Geographic Channel is literally called Rocket City Rednecks.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that one. Right. So it's basically like, Homer Hickam to the nth degree. This was this guy.
Right, but I think they have PhDs too. So
exactly. And at first I thought, this is a harbinger of the end of society as we know it. I gave up. I'm like, we can't do this. This is horrible. Until I actually watched Larry the Cable Guy. And I showed a couple of vignettes of his show to my students in a living learning community here on the use of humor to improve technical education, innovation, and education. Communication, and it's actually not bad. It actually has some decent history content. It's informative, it's educational, but every once in a while you get her done, and that appeals to Joe Sixpack. But I like to believe that somewhere deep in Macon, Georgia, there are Joe Sixpack people who are interested in science and technology. Mm-hmm. It's just the challenge of reaching them that doesn't involve contour integrals in the complex plane and things like that.
Right. Well, I think, what gives me hope is, and I think is very exciting, is the internet now, right? Like, how easy it is to disseminate video content now. So
right.
my one of the things that have come because of this movie is this sort of general excitement about kind of video content and live action, and we've now have a little team because of this movie, and so we're launching next year what we're calling PhD TV. So it'll be an internet channel dedicated to these kinds of things. So doing shows that are
oriented to the geeky world of graduate school.
Yeah, and hopefully a little bit beyond that, right? Just by telling the stories of these graduate students, we can hopefully talk about science and history and geography.
Well, I guess what encouraged me was a new venue I discovered over the last year. So I did some stand-up comedy at this venue, and then I actually did 2 or 3 lectures on sort of science in your everyday life, and it was in the science track of Dragon Con, which is here in Atlanta every fall. And I thought, Dragon Con has a science track? But what's funny is I went in and I talked about science in your everyday life. So I talked about examples I talk about in class and in other lectures. And unlike most technical lectures I will give at an American Chemical Society, American Physical Society symposium, the room was packed. There were 90 people and there were 90 chairs, and every one of my talks was completely packed. Everyone was interested. They were engaged. They asked interesting questions. Now, some of the best questions came from this woman in the front row who had a degree in electrical engineering. Very good questions. She was painted completely blue with fairy wings. So that was a little different. But I was just amazed at how regular people in Dragon Con, who are a little bit geeky, love to consume generic science. So I'm thinking Comic-Con out in California. Have you looked at any of these venues for the movie and for some of your projects?
I have attended Comic-Con, and I had a booth 1 year. But, and it was really great and interesting, and we made money. But I'm not sure that it's something that I'll do every year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But no, I think you're right. I think there's a huge unexplored potential on the internet, especially to do programming that's not aimed necessarily at Joe Sixpack, but at the same time, it's not dry and boring.
Right. So I'm going to watch the screening later this evening, and cool. Hopefully we'll get all the inside jokes, and I'm looking forward to this because it's finally a movie about us. But what does the average person, one of our average listeners, Joe Sixpack, if you will, what's the 1 or 2 thing that they need to know about the graduate school experience? Or should they know?
Yeah, I always think that shows about med students are very popular. Shows about law students are very popular. Why aren't shows about grad students equally important or popular or interesting? Science and engineering affects our everyday life, like you're saying. And in many cases, it's life or death as well. And so, I would say to the average person, these are the people who grade your papers and teach your undergraduate students, and what motivates them to do that? Why are they? Who are they? Who are they? Why are they doing this? And what are they thinking? Is what the movie's about.
Right. So if I were to pick one thing that the average person needs to know, and you do stress this in your comic on a regular basis, and every time I see it I laugh because I remember what this was like, is that they're overworked and underpaid. Because you see these people on these political pundit shows say, well, these people are making big money out of science and global warming and whatever. Them evolution folks, they're making the big bucks.
Yeah, totally.
What they don't realize is you take a guy from a top university with a bachelor's degree, and they could go to work for a large company and actually make very, very good money.
Right.
You take that salary, cut it in half, cut it to a third, sometimes actually now cut it to almost a quarter based on what at least my chemical engineering undergraduates are getting. They come back with these salaries, and I'm like, can I give you my resume next time you go talk to these guys? And you pay them, what is a very, very small amount of money to spend way more than 40 hours a week teaching, grading, going to class, and doing research.
Right.
Now, they get the benefit of this truly open-ended experience, which is amazing, but they're the ones working for pennies trying to push forward the boundaries of science and technology.
Yeah. They're at the front lines, I always say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they are, I think, very underappreciated in society.
Right. And I think the average person certainly does not know that.
Yeah.
So speaking of underappreciated graduate students, since we last spoke, there's sort of been a thing that's been bothering me, and we've been trying to get actually Jennifer Washburn on the program, who wrote University Inc., right? So University Incorporated. The fact that universities now more than ever are becoming driven by industrial applications, the need to get that money from industry, things like that, that now, places like Berkeley, University of South Carolina, have such large contributions from companies. And some of them are companies that were started by university professors. Some of them are other large companies, that it almost dominates this almost free-spirited investigation of science that we used to have, right? If it was funded by the NIH or the NSF, your goal was to produce fundamental science, push forward the boundaries of science, and publish that for all to share, right? That was their big thing. And now we see it at Georgia Tech, and we see it universally, so it's not just Georgia Tech, that they're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place, where the student's not sure, do I work for the company that my boss is starting, or do I work for the university? And those two are at odds with each other, because in the university, you want to do fundamental science, you want to share it through publication. And in fact, having some publications is sort of a measure of you getting ready to get out. Whereas the company's like, no, let's wait, let's patent, let's hold off, maybe we'll make it a trade secret, this sort of thing. And there have been plenty of graduate students that have been caught in between. Did you see any of that when you were a graduate student, or is this a newer phenomenon that I'm just getting paranoid about?
Yes, you're paranoid, I think, Peter. I think
a lot of people say
that's quite
that.
obvious just from meeting you here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think what you're saying is an issue of real concern. I would say that maybe. I think the idea of what corporations are in relation to openness is also changing at the same time that you're seeing this. Right. So we are, for example, seeing places like Google. I mean, they're secretive to a point, but they make, for example, a lot of their APIs open. A lot of their tools that are open to the public. Facebook, Twitter, they profit quite a lot from being open. I think. And so I think at the same time that you're seeing this corporate influence, I think you're also seeing a little bit of that corporate openness.
Right. Certainly among the entrepreneurial companies like, W.L. Gore sort of started that sort of thing with their openness of thing, and Google and things like that. So you're right. Maybe there is a silver lining to the larger companies.
Maybe not drug companies. Those are scary.
Yeah. In fact, drug companies were an example that figured prominently in Jennifer Washburn's book because they operate a lot on trade secrets.
Although I heard now that patents, they go to first to file, not first to.
Right. So, so Charlie's telling me we're at 30 minutes, and so we'll wrap up relatively shortly. But I know there was one question I still wanted to ask you, and that was so this film is PhD the movie. Is this a film that undergraduates or high school students that are thinking of going to graduate school should see, or will they be like, "Oh, I had no idea graduate school was like that"?
I've screened it for my family and my younger cousins, and I think what they get out of it is just again that grad students are real people, and they get that it's fun, and they get that these characters struggle, but in the end they figure things out.
Okay, so that's the good message. The good message is, and this is true of your comic strip as well, that you will not have to lose your humanity and creativity to become a graduate student.
Yes.
Okay. And in
that
fact,
sounds pretty good. Thank you.
So you can use that. But the creativity part actually is the most important part.
Yeah. No, I have a whole bit about procrastination, how it figures into creativity, and how you need this certain balance between boundaries and openness as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think doodling and drawing cartoon strips in any way helped you with your creativity as a graduate student?
Well, it certainly worked out for me, I think,
okay.
as a cartoonist.
Right, but did it actually help you with technical projects?
It did, in funny ways. For example, I procrastinated a lot in grad school. I took gymnastics classes. So I did a lot of tumbling and things like that, and it turned out that then my project was about the dynamics of running and motion and movement, and so I think that helped inform some of that. Or for example, I took a lot of animation classes. Mm-hmm. You can tell I procrastinated a lot in grad school, but I took a lot of art and animation classes, and then the way I sort of figured out the key kind of central insight in my thesis was that I had all this data that I didn't know how to kind of analyze or looked at, and so what I did was I animated it. So I did these animations of some of the forces and how they changed over time as my robots were moving. And so because I had this kind of interest and experience with animation, and I animated the graphs, then I was able to see something that really kind of gave me that aha moment for my thesis.
Oh, okay. And that figures prominently now because even the United States government acknowledges that creativity are important, innovation is a strategic goal. So should we have PhD comics in Pentagon publications?
Yes.
I think we should. Absolutely. That's my conclusion. So anything else you want to tell us about the movie?
No, I hope people get a chance to check it out. There's over 400 screenings worldwide of it. Okay. And we're going to come out with the DVD and online streaming probably in April or March. Okay.
So, and they'll be able to find that information at phdcomics.org?
phdcomics.com.
.com. Okay. So are you still doing screenings? So if there was a university or an organization that wanted to screen it, could they contact you about that? Or are you sort of ending that phase and they can just sort of buy the...
No. It's you can screen it. There's screenings being scheduled in January and February, so that's
great.
At least. And even after that, even after the DVD comes out, a lot of people don't know this, but you can't just
buy the DVD and show it to 300 people.
Yes. You can't just do
absolutely.
That. That's not. You need a special license
right,
for
and
that.
I'm sure you have a bank of lawyers to enforce that.
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But 3 or 4 graduate students with a little malt liquor, probably not a problem.
It'll get her done there.
Right, there you go. Yeah. Always back to Larry the Cable Guy, who is now...
He's a nexus now.
The nexus of humor in education. So I guess my final question is, so we're very excited about it because it's Georgia Tech, right? And you did your undergraduate work here. We're a bunch of nerds who are very excited about this film. Are there any organizations that are screening it that are not graduate degree granting institutions? I mean... Did like the Boy Scouts call you up and say, "Yeah, we got to see this film," or anything like that?
Maybe. I don't. I'm sort of out of the little bit of the loop of who's screening the movie, but yeah, we've had interest from a lot of people, corporations as well. They're screening IBM, I think. DreamWorks is screening it. Facebook is screening it in their campus.
Oh wow!
Yeah, pretty cool.
So there you go.
Yeah. It's screening in Antarctica as well at McMurdo. So we have all
okay, so that's all the NSF sponsors sign. Well, we got to do something. Let's get that down here.
Yeah. There's not much else to do down there, I guess.
Wow, that's great. So basically, PhD, the movie, not just for geeks anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to end on that.
Cool.
So, Jorge, thanks so much for being on the program. And I realized last time you were on the program, we did not have anything for you. And I know you've been looking for souvenirs, so I actually have it in both black and white. Okay, I hope I didn't sweat on this one too much because it was sitting in my pocket. I have the official plastic vinyl pocket protector of the Inside the Black Box program, both in black and white, for you, the ultimate nerd.
Cool.
All right.
More than funny looking.
There you go. And I think that's true.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Yeah, thank you.